Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. The Practical Guitarist Podcast is brought to you by Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Great Lakes Guitar Pickups provides fantasy tones at prices a practical guitarist will love. Featuring top-notch construction, attention to detail, and a fully custom product, if you can dream it, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups can probably build it. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Are you a regular listener? Why not? David here reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Review us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/practicalguitarist or on Twitter as @practguitarist. Support the show. Merchandise is available in our Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And donate to us via Patreon, available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. Reach out to us directly via email at questions@practicalguitarist.com. Hi, Jim.
Hi, David.
I'm going to rock this episode tonight. How are you doing?
I am a little sad for one of our members.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take just a moment of silence. One of our members, a family friend, has passed away along with their whole, the wife, husband, everybody, whole party of people. They were in a limousine in upstate New York, very small town, and 20 people have been killed in this crash. So, if we could just take a short few seconds of silence to remember them. All right, thanks everybody.
Yep.
If that wasn't a minute, I'm terrible because I've been told I'm like a dog. I have no sense of time.
It was. Listen, I mean, any tragic event like that, just to take a few moments to like kind of reflect on lives that were lost, even if you were not connected to them, to show support for the people that are involved in those situations is always helpful.
Yeah, so. All right. So let's get on to a much happier and less heated topic. Tone.
Yeah.
Where is tone? Where does tone exist?
I don't think we should talk about this.
Yes, we should, because religion and politics are too hot to be topics.
This is the religion and politics of guitar. Anyone who plays guitar and has been on the internet in like these forums in the last 10 years, you have seen this argument, and you have seen it collapse, and people just turn on each other, and memes come out, and then it gets ugly, and then I'm just sitting there with the Michael Jackson popcorn meme, eating popcorn at Thriller, because I knew it was going to happen.
Well, I'm going to say this. So of course the person that brought this up, Nick Bongers, thank you to Nick Bongers of Great Lakes Pickups, posted this in our group. It's what's that?
Great Lakes Guitar Pickups.
Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. That's right.
Pickup trucks.
If you say Great Lakes Great Lakes Pickups, you'll find a lot of guitars and the ability to get rid of your trash. So it's Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. The article is from Ultimate Guitar, and it's Joe Bonamassa, and he's never said anything that caused people to go crazy.
No, one of our highest rated episodes doesn't have anything to do with Joe Bonamassa.
Nothing to do with him. So I'm going to give a quick sweep of it because I honestly
You didn't look it over?
agree with it.
Oh. Well, I'm going to sweep it. I'm going to sweep it right under the rug so we don't have to have everybody fighting in the group. I told Jim before we did this episode that next week's episode will cover all the hate mail we get for this one.
And we will be willing to read them. So here's the thing. The guitarist, obviously Joe Bonamassa, said, if you purchase a new guitar, the worst thing you can do, if you like it at the store, on eBay or Reverb, where you got it, the guy at McDonald's, whatever. If you liked the guitar initially, I would be very hesitant to immediately get it home, strip it, and go, I'm going to put so-and-so saddles because the internet told me they're better than the original. I'm going to put compensated this because the internet told me. I would be very leery of putting all that money into it because you may or may not get your desired result. What this is saying is you get food. We've talked about this before. You get food, you instantly put salt on it because you always put salt on that food, even though you haven't even tried it. You put salt on it. So
I know, and I have high cholesterol and stuff, so I'm trying to watch my salt intake.
Yeah. The point is, you're making a change to something you haven't even tried. Whether it's, and he's even saying, you don't need to spend $200,000 on a Les Paul. Spend $400 on an Epiphone. Try it first. See if you like it. If you don't like it, then modify it. That's all he's saying in the whole article. But man, people just bleeding. There's people cutting their wrists and letting the blood flow onto it in protest.
Guys, because they're
running for the Supreme Court.
Everybody's still fucking pissed off because Joe Bonamassa said that people who use too many pedals suck, or whatever the hell he said.
Well, I think what he's saying is, all right, you buy the guitar, you don't even try it, you run out, you buy all the parts that you think are going to make the guitar that you haven't even tried better.
I have a special report, Jim. Joe, yep, special report. Joe Bonamassa is now moving. He has just acquired property underneath a bridge because he's a fucking troll.
And you're gonna have to pay $25 to cross the bridge. What is your favorite color?
African or European? Anyway, moving on.
African or European? I don't know. So again, this is really clickbait because he's not saying anything negative. He's just saying, give peace a chance, I mean, all right, let's go to your guitar that you recently purchased that you've been upgrading since you got it.
Which one is Shangzai?
The Shangzai. So yes, you got it. You had to do certain things to upgrade it because the tuners weren't going to tune the guitar. They had to go.
They were not functional.
Correct. The pickups were way too microphonic, but you didn't just change them. You tried them.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I did. I was hoping I could make them work, and that wasn't happening. But yeah, so I mean, anybody who buys a guitar, when you go to the store and you sit down and you play it, let's put ourselves in Jim and David's shoes. We go to the store, we pick up a guitar, we play it, we like the way it sounds. Right. I don't get home and immediately jump on the internet and go, how do I improve this? Because I like the way it sounds. Like, I don't have to mess with it. Now, there are many guitars in my past where I have said, I need a hum single configuration, and all I can find is a Stratocaster with 3 single coils. So I'll buy this guitar and I will upgrade the bridge pickup. Like I've been in that that exact situation, but I've been in that situation before, and I think anybody who is kind of that mind is going to be looking at this as a project. I know that's going to be part of the cost of the guitar. Like, for example, I've been planning for the Gearfest trip, and I wanted to ask my rep, if I buy a guitar on site, can I have them mod it in their shop before I go home?
Right.
Like, that's the kind of stuff that, because for me, I'm buying that guitar with a purpose to do something. I don't buy it and then kind of explore through it. And I know there are guys that do that, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. But the joke was made in the group, and I think I actually said the exact comment to somebody who I believe is Steve, who from 60 Cycle Hum, who said, I'm going to buy a $300 guitar and put $1,000 worth of parts in it. Well, that's why I laugh, because I'm like, only if you're going to play it the rest of your life. I mean, don't expect that that's going to do anything for you value-wise. And honestly, I think you will end up with a good guitar if you do that. My Strat, I got that white Jimmy Vaughn Strat that's going to get upgraded, and I might make that some show content for us. That's a guitar that if I left it stock, I don't like it the way it is now. But if I make some modifications, that could carry me through for another 15 years. Yeah. If it's set up the right way for what I need.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about that. I've been discussing getting a Strat. Do I get a Strat and upgrade it, or and the first thing I'd get though is I'd have to sit down, like we discussed last week. I'd have to play 40 or 50 of them.
Yeah, and you figure out what's not working and what is working. And
exactly,
that's the main thing. Joe Bonamassa is saying the same thing as you and I would say, which is sit down with it, play it, find out what isn't working, swap that out. Right. That's practical.
So, Mike Hogg, I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Mike. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Send him some hate mail. We'll read it next week.
Yeah. He brought up a good point. His point number 2 was going back to the headline. I think that many folks lose sight of the foundations of their tone. I'm very much a gearhead, and I love to tweak, explore, and really do love my pedals. But I do feel it's very important to connect with my own sound and then connect with and the connection my playing has with just the amp and the guitar and the amp. On the same point, I see many people buy an instrument or some other piece of equipment they've spent little to no time with, and they've already have plans to change it. We all do, myself included. The issue is that many folks are prematurely mod-minded. That could be modifying an instrument, a piece of equipment, or some aspect of their setup. The assumption ahead of the actual purchase or soon after it is that the item or setup is either not good enough as it is, or that it will change and make it better. Mm-hmm. In some cases, there is often room for improvement, but the plan changes are not always the right ones. Take the time to know your gear very deeply, how it responds to you, and how the different pieces of gear respond to each other. He just reiterated what the article said. Yeah. And I want to say this. I'm just as guilty. Good Lord, am I just as guilty. I see a new piece of gear, and it's like a bright, shiny new penny. I have to have that one because I think my old one isn't as good. But they both spend the same. And, I'm getting to where I'm comfortable. I need a wah pedal only because of what I'm doing for the disco sound. I have to have that wah thing. Right. And possibly a Qtron auto wah thing. But because I don't really know if I want an actual pedal, but maybe just a auto wah.
The Boss AW3 is really good. I had one.
Yep.
Highly recommend.
The Boss AW3?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the one I think I'm going to look at. So I'm gonna compare that with the Full Tone and the Crybaby and see where I go.
Yeah, you're still going to need a regular wah, but because they're really a different sound. But the AW3 is a really, really good auto wah.
Oh, that's the auto wah? Yeah, I need something good like that. Because sometimes you just got to have that wah, 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 wah,
and it does it in spades.
And I don't need my calf to be.
You could even make a tap tempo.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you'll like it.
Nice. So anyway, getting to this, we think that we talked about the parts. We're talking about having a T-shirt done, folks, and I'm hoping we get some interest in this, where we're going to do like the food pyramid. Only we're going to do the tone pyramid,
the hierarchy of tone, which is something that I had mentioned in a previous episode.
Right,
not to toot my own horn so much.
Right, so we're going to look to do like that. Try to get somebody to do some artwork with us, and do the tone pyramid, the pyramid of tone, so that you can say, oh yeah, you know what, because really your speaker, your amplifier, and then your pedals and so on and so forth. So in all reality, I'm thinking about obviously I need to get a Strat, and I'm thinking about getting on the Epiphone just to have to change pickups out every now and again, which I may have to do a lot very shortly. Yeah. Those of you listening, you'll hear about as time goes on, but I will have to change my pickups more and more. So there is there's a need that's driving that.
Jim, if that comes to fruition, if you have to get an Epiphone, I'm going to buy one of them shitty G400s.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I might buy a freaking G400 because I get it for nothing. I get it for no money.
That could be a mule for the show. Because it's a full pick guard. All right, go on.
So anyway, that's Now you're taking my idea. I was just going to get a crappy little G400.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, which will be purchased just to change the pickups out. So but you'll see why that is later.
Yep.
So that's not for us and our tone thing, and it's not breaking any rules.
No.
I don't think.
No.
Because it's for
shit. You really think I want to play a G400? Has anybody heard me talk about the G400 on this show before? If you have, you know I don't want to play that fucking thing.
If you haven't, let's just say that David would rather have you shove it up his rear end than play it. But
no,
he's got to
no.
Okay, smack him upside the head with it.
No. I'd rather you grind
so
it. No, I'd rather you grind it into mush and feed it to me in my Wheaties. Like.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, toxic.
So that's a great thing, this post is getting a lot of traction. So, folks, where is your tone? Is it in your fingers? Is it in your guitar? We're talking about your year of no gear. What have you learned as you've been pumping along in the year of no gear?
Tone is in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's in my. I'm laughing because I'm about to say something that's going to make me sound like a total asshat, but I'm going to say it anyway. Tone is in my ball sack. Okay. No. All right. So in all honesty, all right. Let me back up here. So now we're traversing the minefield, right? This is the question that gets people fucking angry as hell on the internet, and it goes. There's like a couple of guitar related questions. Tone wood. That's the other one. That's the other one. But this one in particular, tone is in the fingers. Look, let's back up. Let's talk about why this is a minefield, and then I'm gonna present to you my argument.
And then I'll present.
No, you won't have one. There will be nothing left to argue with, Jim. When I'm done decimating this, the battlefield will be clear. So. This is an argument because, look, everybody has heard some famous player, insert famous asshole here, player here, plugged into somebody else's rig that still sounds like them, right? And everybody's got their little anecdotal story. I saw Eric Clapton plug into a 10-watt solid-state Gorilla or something, and it still sounded like Eric Clapton. Well, no fucking duh.
I saw Eric Johnson plug into Zakk Wylde's gear, and it sounded just like Eric Johnson.
Which, actually, it was Eric Johnson playing Zakk Wylde's guitar through his setup. That's the funny part of that.
Eric Johnson's setup.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So, here, let me drop... I'm going to drop some truth bombs on you. I'm getting so... I don't know what is wrong with me tonight. I watched the fight last night, and I'm ready to go, man. All right, so,
say the truth, David. Say it.
I'm gonna say it.
Let's say it.
I need to center myself. I need to focus. I need to achieve. I am special. I am a special snowflake. No. So, man, it just gets me because, all right, so tone. We as guitar players, we have our own slang. We have our own musical terminology that is separate from the rest of the world. All right? So any other instrument, you talk to a violinist, when you talk about tone, they're like, I'm not really sure exactly what you're referring to. Do you mean timbre? Right? So that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the characteristic envelope of attack and articulation in addition to the EQ curve and all that different stuff that goes on in the synthesis of a sound. And I don't mean synthesis in the sense of making a sound from scratch, but in the waveform that a sound produces. Okay, when you get down to the basic acoustic science level. But that's the difference. Okay, so when Eddie Van Halen plugs into some asshole's Fender Twin with a super distortion out front, and he's got that guy's single coil equipped guitar, and he's doing all the tapping, and he's sliding around, and he's playing Top Jimmy or something. Everybody goes, that still sounds like Eddie Van Halen, because Eddie Van Halen's technique allows him to get at least half, if not more, of what he normally gets from his existing rig. And that's what it boils down to. We talk about timbre, but what we're really not timbre, we talk about tone, and what we're really talking about is technique half the time. Not just, hey, this is the sound that instrument produces. And I think part of it's because guitar players, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, stringed instruments in general are the most expressive instruments there are, because there's so much opportunity for articulation and to make the instrument do things that you're not used to doing. So the reason why I clarify that is because if you take a trumpet, yes, a player does have some impact on the timbre of a trumpet. It's not the same thing, though. Not at all. It's largely determined by the instrument. Very loosely determined by things like microphone placement in a studio recording, and also very loosely determined by musculature, amount of air you're pushing through the instrument, whether the valves are clean or not, whether you have just released all the spit from the instrument, which if you've ever been in a band situation with horns, you can hear that inside the instrument. You're not going to hear it on recordings because they do make sure they're drained. But in a live performance, if they don't have time, you can hear it. By the way, you can hear my cats fighting in the background behind me, probably. That's my point. I've said this in this argument in a dozen different places, and now I've sworn off having this conversation with people on the internet because it just ends up in a pissing match, and people get so like, I'm right, I'm wrong, or you're wrong, I'm right, and nobody can change my opinion. And it's like, no, you're not right. Go ask every other fucking musician out there that doesn't play guitar, and they'll tell you you're not right. Do you think keyboard players debate this? The keyboard determines the timbre. The keyboard itself. And I'm talking about whether it's an organ, whether it's a piano. I'm not saying piano to piano they don't sound different. That's why a lot of places choose to use Yamaha, because they're consistent. But I am saying that the pianist does not control the tone of a piano. It's hammers, okay? Hammers hitting a string. I don't care how hard they're beating on that damn thing. It's not going to change the sound of the soundboard and all the different things that are inside that piano that produce the sound. Now, that's where I'm at. I'm not saying that technique does not largely determine the personality of a person behind an instrument. So that, in that sense, I think when we as guitar players use the word tone, we're talking about personality, right? Which is a summation of timbre and technique. That's it. I'm done. Said enough. I think everybody can kind of infer where I'm going with this. Right? Jim, have I been successful? He's looking at me funny.
I was on mute. Yes.
Good.
And you know what?
Just shut up.
You stole you were right. You stole what I was going to, my point was going to be this. The player is still going to be the player. Doesn't matter what you hand them. The quote unquote timbre of the instrument is going to come through based on the gear. But for the most part, and most of our tone, I think there
our
is style of playing.
There is a very, very minute amount of like the flesh from your fingers and the way that sounds that comes through. Yep. And there's also the way you use your pick, the way you hold your pick, the way you strike the strings, what pick you use, or whether you use a pick or fingers. Those things all do have an impact. But I'm just saying that's technique. That's something you control by the way you do it. That's absolutely right. Not so much what you're what you're using, but the way you do it. So you have some control.
I'm going to take this out of the guitar community for just a second. You took it to keyboards. I'm going to take it to vocals. So if you take vocalists, you think a vocalist that walks up to a microphone and sings, and they use an SM58, or then they use this microphone, and they use that microphone, this PA type, that PA type. Right. They're still gonna. Freddie Mercury sounded like Freddie Mercury, no matter what he tried to do. The fact is that when you're singing, there are little things, and it's easier, I think, for us to comprehend when we look at it this way. about the facial mask, about your nose, the size of your nose, the size of the mask behind your eyeballs, the flesh that's back there, how you project, which part of your abdomen or your chest. Are you singing from your chest? Or you're singing from your abdomen. How open and round is your voice? How closed is it? How long is your tongue? And how do you formulate letters when you announce them or pronounce them while you're singing? This can be very different, as you probably have seen with people that sing and talk, and it's like, well, that person doesn't sound anything like they do when they talk. So the last thing you should ever do is judge a person's singing voice by their talking voice. But the point I'm making is all of those things come together, and your mouth becomes your speaker. But the thing that actually makes noise for your voice, the thing that causes all those tones, are the smallest muscles inside your throat. They're the size of your eyelashes that are vibrating at high speed. Mm-hmm. So don't, again, you're trying to say, okay, if I change my strings, it's going to make this huge change in my tone. Well, not really. I mean, and it's the whole package. And we get to that whole pyramid of tone, We've all got those little muscles inside our throats. So what is it, or inside of our larynx, actually? What is it that is that it makes up the way we sound? Why does David's voice sound different from mine if we're still both using these small little muscles? It's because of the way it's coming through, and the rest of the way. And through the rest of the head. Mm-hmm. Just saying. So no matter how much you try to sound like Arnel Pena, people say, "Oh, he sounds just like Steve Perry." No, he doesn't. He sounds much like Steve Perry. He does not sound just like Steve Perry. And no amount of special effects and EQ and
vocal surgery,
right, will change that.
In other news, I'm thinking of talking to a plastic surgeon about getting collagen implants for my fingertips so that I can change the tone of my actual fingertip. No, I'm kidding.
That's what.
Wouldn't it be funny though, like if somebody was actually going to do that? Now, there's a long lost episode from this show that will never see the light of day, and there was an interesting conversation that I think kind of plays into this idea of like surgically modifying yourself for things, and that is. What if you could do gene therapy and you could go and say, get the genes from Eddie Van Halen? I don't know how you would obtain them. And then go to your guy and say, all right, so I want to change my fingers to have the same chemical composition as Eddie Van Halen. And you take some pills over a period of like 6 months. And then by the end of it, you're going to have the same callus patterns and you're going to have the same calluses and all of that. You're still not going to sound like him.
No.
Because you don't have the technique.
No. He pushes down a different way. He bends up a different way. He uses his vibrato arm a different way. Everything that Eddie Van Halen does, or any guitar player, insert guitar player name.
It's habit.
And there's nothing, they can't undo that any more than you can do that. You can do your best to sound like it, and do your best to get close, but you're never going to be exact, ever. And you just have to accept that. You will. I think that the thing that Joe Bonamassa said in that article that hits the hardest is, if you're chasing a tone that you hear in your head, it's the wrong way to go. You need to get your head wrapped around the tone you're getting out of your fingers.
Yeah. So while we're gracing topics from the Facebook group, I want to clarify some comments that were made on the Behemoth ad in the last episode.
Yes.
I saw some people kind of jump me, and my comment about Behemoth, and I actually took some time to do some Google image searching after the episode.
Right.
My comment about Behemoth and their current marketing for whatever their record it is right now, which we couldn't read because their font was like, what the fuck was that?
It was ridiculous.
the reason why I brought it up, look, I wasn't making light of the fact that they were doing an anti-Christian thing. Like every metal band does that. That's not surprising. I mean, that's
you
been
should
the
see
thing
last
since
week's South Park, by the way.
that's been a thing since Black Sabbath. Even though Black Sabbath admitted that it was all fun and games and like they really are all Christian, to some extent. I think. I mean, that's basically what's come out. Like Ozzy's like, no, I have deep respect for God and stuff like that.
Right.
My point is that in their marketing, they used the image of the inversion of the Pope, the Black Pope, right?
Right.
And that is very much been the domain lately and dominant marketing strategy behind the band Ghost.
Right.
And like I've seen so in doing my Google image search after get kind of called out, I want to clarify. Look, yes, they've used lots of satanic imagery before, cults, demons like the Nurgle and all that stuff with the horns and various images like that. But I don't think they ever got to the point where they were like doing the Gothic church imagery so much as they did in this ad. And I'm fine with that. Look, they're very, very different bands. And the people that are listening to Behemoth are not necessarily the same people that are listening to Ghost. Like, Ghost is actually, to me, has a very mainstream sound to it. Where Behemoth is balls to the wall, grindy metal. And you have to be a certain kind of person to be able to stomach Behemoth. That's fine. Like, I wasn't trying to disrespect anyone. I know there are Behemoth fans that also follow the show. Like, there was no disrespect made at all. I was just merely commenting on the fact that it seems like the marketing in metal, specifically with these things like fonts, is like everybody gets on a bandwagon and then they all go down that path. And it's really strange because even like for a while there in the 90s, all the logos and marketing for some of these metal bands were like these fancy font logos. Is that the current Ghost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ghost, just to give you an idea.
Their new album has come out. It's actually very good. I would recommend it. If anybody's exploring Ghost, you're looking for some Halloween music, their new album is really, really good. And
what do you see for an image? This was August of 2018 issue, so it would have come out in June. And we've got the black.
Actually, that's Cardinal Copia.
Pope thing. Yeah.
But it's the same kind of idea, like inverted clergy. Cardinal Copia.
Yeah, you're right. It's inverted clergy, and they're doing the whole thing. Matter of fact, they've got another shot where they invert the entire clergy, and then they put almost a pinhead guy in the background there.
Oh no, that's that's the normal demon look for the rest of the band.
Yeah,
because they put it.
I'm not a follower, so
all right. So let's do a little Ghost trivia. So Ghost is actually Tobias Forge.
Tobias Forge.
That is Ghost. No, that is Ghost. What I said. Right?
Tobias Forge.
Meaning
he's the singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist.
And this came out because of a court case where the previous band members, after being terminated, are released from their contract. They were apparently being paid a salary. They got mad. They sued because they wanted payment, I think, for a tour. And he was like, well, you were salaried. That's not how this works. And so they ended up going to court, which caused the band to be unmasked, which actually probably damaged some of their mystique, which was behind their marketing. And Tobias Forge has just come out with this new record. And it's, for me at least, it's silenced a lot of the people that were like, Ghost is nothing without the original members. I don't think any of those guys were ever on record, to be honest with you.
And in here he says, my whole life, my family's lives, we were all so invested in this and have sacrificed so much and are depending on this. Why would I sacrifice that for a bunch of fuck-ups? That's what he called the guys that he got rid of. This whole article is about that.
Yeah, I think there's probably somewhere in there, because I know I've read some of the court documents, and there's somewhere in there where he actually says something the equivalent of, it's either in that article, court documents, or another interview, where he says, like, I tried my ass off to make those guys happy, and I actually wanted to include them in the decision-making process and actually in the songwriting and recording process, but every time we went to go sit at the table, it was like pulling teeth, and it was their way or nothing. And so he did what he had to do. He took control of the band. This is not the first time we've seen one-man band situation.
No, I mean, if you look at it, if you look at the one-man band situations, obviously Prince did it.
And was very successful at it for a number of years.
Yeah. Lenny Kravitz did it. Aldo Nova did it. I mean,
when it's signed to the Times is all Prince.
Yeah,
I think that's the record that he did.
His first album was all him too.
I thought the record label forced him to have studio players on there.
I thought that that's why he waited till he was 18. I'd have to go back and reread it.
Yeah, you might be right.
He said something about the fact that he wasn't 18 when he first started the thing, and they were forcing him to. He had to bring in another producer. He had to bring in an engineer. He had to bring in studio. He said, "Screw you! I'll wait until I'm 18, then I can own the rights." And then he went in and did it.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Okay.
Otherwise, he would have started at like 16 or 17.
Anyway, so let's wrap up this Tone is in the Fingers discussion. I know we've gotten off track and we're talking about ghosts.
Tone is in the fingers, period, end of discussion.
No, it's fucking not in the fingers. I think we've established at this point. Look.
What? Wait a minute.
That phrase.
I was just established
that
the other way around.
Fucking phrase, Tone is in the fingers, needs to die. It's just like the most archaic thing I've ever heard.
Tone is in the fingers, timbre is in the gear.
No, tone is not in the fingers. That's the entire point. Like timbre isn't.
With you. You guys should see how easy it is to mess with Dave.
I'm just like I'm really fired up about a topic, and then Jim like he just sits there and he's like fuck you, thank you. I'm just gonna mess with you now. He's like a little troll. Go eat some fucking billy goats.
Give me $25 to cross my bridge.
Fucking throw you under your bridge. You can live in a van down by the river.
In a van down by the river.
Anyway. So we have another topic lined up for tonight. Submitted by someone close to the show. We're going to be talking about the pig in a poke argument, which if you haven't listened to our episode Pig in a Poke, you can go back and you can listen to that one. Pig in a poke, if you're not familiar with the terminology, is buying something sight unseen. Jim, you recently done this. You bought that Pelham Blue SG,
right?
And there were some questions about that guitar, but we're gonna be focusing instead of just like the broad part of the topic because we've already talked about that. We will talk about players' grade vintage guitar pieces, and really vintage guitars in general. So Jim and I have been looking on Reverb, and we've seen a couple of different instruments. And then, of course, you bought that Pelham Blue SG, and I've been looking at vintage stuff too. And it seems to be that there's a lot of disparity in prices in the vintage world. And as guitars get older, they go through lots of styles of abuse. If you're looking at vintage Gibsons, there's often headstock breaks. You can find guitars with the necks that have had to been steamed or removed, and then maybe flattened or planed or something like that. You find that kind of stuff once you get to a guitar that's 30 to 40 years old. Yeah. I guess we should probably step back and kind of define what vintage is. I would say vintage is anything pre-1990.
I would say so. Anything that's older than 25 years, we'd be getting into that vintage thing.
Now, so vintage does not mean good. I'm going to say that right now. There's a lot of old pieces of shit that people call vintage.
Even if they carry the moniker of Fender Stratocaster or Gibson Les Paul, there are shit guitars out there. Let me talk a little bit, and again, take it out of the guitar world for just a second. So let's say you were going to buy a new car, and this does happen, by the way. So you buy a new car, and it's about 3 months after a recent hurricane in the South.
Oh, fuck that.
Exactly. So if you're looking at, well, I shouldn't say new car, used car. So if you look at that, a lot of, and even in the new car market, a lot of vehicles get flooded during.
Yeah, I was gonna say, show me the water line.
Yeah, and then they get dried out. The insurance company take them in, and then these fly-by-night sales places on the side of the road are selling them.
Yeah, they usually they'll have a salvage title, but that's not always the case.
Right, and you don't always know. And if you think new cars are immune to that, you don't know that there's new car lots that get flooded, because there are, and it does happen.
I mean, well, the classic case in the Midwest is hail damage. Hailstorm comes through, wait 6 weeks, and then you will see these cars at hugely discounted prices because the damage is severe.
So the question that you have to ask yourself, again, in the guitar market, there was a flood that took out hundreds of guitars in the Midwest,
and there have been more since then.
Nashville, right? I'm just using that example. There was also Hurricane Katrina. Thousands of guitars that were underwater there that were stolen, then resold out of the market and put into the hands. Point is, a guitar's history is a questionable thing as it is, and then you add one of the ones that we were looking at today. What to you is wear that looks great, and what are you willing to pay for the object that you're about to get? Let's say you're looking at let's say it's a 19 your birth year is 1985. So you're looking for a 1985 guitar.
Kramer Beretta.
Let's think. What would have been a good guitar in 1985?
A Kramer Beretta.
Okay, Kramer Beretta. I thought he was talking about the car for a second.
Oh, fuck that. That was not a good car.
That was the 90s, and that was not a good car. But anyway, so let's say you were looking up a Kramer Beretta from 1985. Or
let's do 84. It's my birth year, and I'm looking at one right now.
There you go. All right, so there's going to be a bit of nostalgia for you because it was your birth year, right?
Yep.
So you're willing to put a little bit of money into that.
Yeah, sure. Be honest with you. So the one I'm looking at, it's on Reverb right now. It's being sold by Emerald City Guitars, which I believe is in Seattle, which would go with Emerald City. It's a 1984 Kramer Beretta at $2,500 plus $70 shipping. 1984 Kramer Beretta, most iconic Kramer guitar, most notably played by Eddie Van Halen and one of the major players in the Super Strat craze. This one is a one-owner instrument in amazing all original condition with hardly any signs of wear. Plays beautiful and features a lightning-fast slim neck profile. Floyd Rose tremolo bridge with locking nut and a single Shaler humbucker in the bridge position. Absolutely rips, delivering an into-your-face punchy sound. Killer guitar for heavy rock tones. Includes the original case. So this is a prime example right here. This is not a player's grade piece. This is a collector's grade piece, because when you look at this guitar, this thing went in somebody's bedroom and stayed in a case and never.
Are you looking at the white one?
Yeah, it never came out.
Nope, that thing that looks gorgeous. That's day one new.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's not even any pick scratches in this thing. Not from what I can tell in the pictures.
Nope, just typical paint aging.
Yeah, so $2,500 does not seem insane for this specific thing. I would say I think that's probably still $500 too expensive, because these don't have a tremendous collector's market. They do have a collector's market, but not the kind of collector's market that this guy does. Now, if we scroll down in the listings, there is a 1987, 1988, which they call a flip-flop. I don't know what that means, but they want $7,000 for that. For a Kramer Beretta from the 80s.
Yep.
I mean, yes, I don't care if it has rare features or anything like that. That's insanely expensive.
Yep.
Unless this is a custom shop guitar, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
And so this is where I want to go with this. First factor is age, right? Like, how old is the guitar you're buying? If you're buying a guitar from the 80s, I can't honestly see paying more than $2,000 for something. I don't care what it is, because for one thing, it's not nitro, so the finish is not going to look aged or anything like that. You're not paying anything for aesthetic, really, other than maybe scratches, dents, dings. Maybe the parts are desirable, maybe they're not. There were a lot of guitars in the 80s using licensed Floyd Rose systems, because the real Floyd Roses were not available to everybody. I believe Fender had the contract for that for a while. Some people were still doing aftermarket on that stuff. You'll see a lot of guitars in that period that have swapped out hardware because they got a licensed Floyd and then they put the real deal in there. And I guess that's kind of where I'm going with it. Once you get into player's grade territory, like then you're looking at dense dings, you're looking at pickware, you're looking at swapped electronics and hardware on an 80s era piece. You go to the 70s era, then you're going to start looking at things like neck repairs, and you're going to add $1,000 to the price tag, if not $1,500. But my point is, there's got to be a line of demarcation where when you're looking at a vintage guitar, you say this is $3,000 or $3,500 market value. It's had a neck repair, meaning either the headstock broke or you had to remove it from the heel. And then you've got like non-original pickups, which is always a problem on these guitars, like a Gibson, that kind of deal. And how much of the guitar is deviated from what your perception of the guitar is going to be like. And then to get back to the pick and a poke argument is that's got to count for something in what you're going to pay for it.
That's exactly what I was going to get to. So let's say you want that 1984 Kramer. Have you ever played one?
I have played a couple of Berettas, not from that year though.
Okay. So this is what I would say if Dave was to come to me and say, "Hey Jim, was this worth this?" I would say to him straight up, if you haven't felt that neck, you don't really know if that's the gear that you want. If you haven't had that guitar around your neck, there's I'll give you a prime example. So at church, I play a Stratocaster. Typically, I would think, okay, Stratocaster, lighter than my Les Paul, and
depends.
Not this one. Oh my God!
Yeah, mine's a brick.
This thing weighs a ton. It's horrible, and it's the neck is okay, but not the neck that I envision with a Stratocaster. So. If he was to say to me, if the pastor would say to me, "Hey Jim, do you want to buy my Strat?" I would really kind of have to pleasantly decline. So it's one of those things where you've really got to know the guitar that you're looking at. So if you're looking for, let's say you want a 75 SG or a 61 SG, let's say it was 61 SG, those are rare. Okay, now you are paying for a rarity. Because there aren't a lot of them because they don't say SG on them. They say Les Paul, right?
Yeah, you're paying for at rarity, exclusivity.
Yep.
Which they're not mutually exclusive.
No.
And you're paying for implied value of parts in some of the guitars too. It's like when you get into 61, you're talking about the 59 style pickups, the PAFs, and those go for what, like $500 a piece on the open market. So there you go. There's there's like 30-year value or whatever you're going to pay for it. I think 61 SGs are going for upwards of $10K now, though.
Yeah. I was just looking at one.
Yeah, the big guard ones are a lot cheaper, and to be honest with you, they're less problems.
Yep.
So.
Yep. That I wish that wasn't the case, but it's true. So if let's say that I wanted to get one, because that would be. For me, that would be an historical piece, not necessarily because I was born that way or anything, just an historical piece that I would want to put away. So I would be purchasing it not as a player's guitar, but as a piece. So I'm going to want something that looks as good as possible because I'm going to put it in glass, put it away, right? But if I was looking for a player's one, I would probably just go reissue.
Yeah, I would look for a headstock break, go reissue. I mean, there's a lot of options.
Or one with a headstock break. Now, if somebody, and here's what we were talking about earlier today. Somebody puts one up and it's had a neck replacement or a headstock break, and they want almost
full value.
What would be considered full value. You need to realize that I'm going to wait and move on and find one that eventually will come up and. I'll get it.
It's that, and it's also the realization that you as a player have not had hands on this instrument. And so unless you have some sort of rock solid guarantee, because when you're talking player's grade, that's more expensive than a guitar. Like even then, is more expensive than its counterpart, new production guitar in most cases. Right. And so you're buying it for the mojo, and then when you get it in, and you're like, oh, the truss rod won't turn. Or, there's something else. The neck rattles. I've seen that before, too. Or the hardware is not original.
Right. So if you're not somebody that can work on their own guitars, It's like buying an old car.
You better be able to return it.
That's right. If you can't work on your own guitars, and here's the other thing. So let's say let's say I say, you know what, I'm going to buy that 1961 Les Paul, which is a SG.
Yeah.
And so I contact the person and we do some negotiating, and they send me the guitar. Here's the other thing I better be able to do: know whether or not it's fake. Because let me tell you, Keith Richards' guitar has been sold many times, and Keith Richards never sold his guitar. It's a 54 Les Paul or a 55.
Yeah.
One of his old Les Pauls has been sold several times, and his has never actually left his side. What they're selling has been fakes. So they're out there and they get a premium price tag. We're not talking about $2,000 or $3,000 fake. We're talking about a $15,000 fake.
Yeah, when we go back, there's an episode we did where we talked about Ed Roman and the Tone King and stuff, and I think I mentioned this story or anecdote that Ed Roman had, which is that, yeah, I made a lot of 59s because he was making them in his shop, counterfeiting them, putting them on the roof to age them, and then putting them downstairs when they were appropriately yellowed and selling them for, whatever they were going for at the time. And when you stop and you think about that for a minute, any Fender or Gibson from that era could be knocked off.
That's right.
And it's easier to knock those guitars off. Like nowadays, there are so many different damn models of Stratocaster. It's hard to get all of the details right. And you can look at the Chinese companies are trying, and they're doing a half-assed job of it. Even the Gibsons are the same way. So I mean, like, when you go and you try to examine whether you're willing to take that risk, just bear in mind that this has been a thing long before Chinese guitars existed.
Long before.
In fact, and I've
Flash's famous Les Paul is a knockoff.
There's his is not a knockoff. He had it built for him, but he's a ghost builder. That's a whole other thing. If you don't know, and I forget who the builder was, there's a guy that used to live in San Diego on the beach, and he would build guitars for famous players. And Slash heard about him through somebody else and decided he wanted a Les Paul built to the old 59 spec. So he went to this guy and paid him. Now the thing where it gets quasi legal is the guy's putting Gibson on the headstock.
That's what I was about to say. It's still, I mean, I'm not saying that it isn't a good fake. It's still a fake. Well, it's a fake Gibson. It's a real guitar. The guy built for real in America.
But the difference between counterfeit and replica is great there because, if you buy from Ed Roman, if you went to his shop back in the 70s and you bought one of those 59s,
for something
you would not know. He never told you that that's what it was.
That's right.
Now,
he didn't. Right.
Shocking statistic. 59 Les Pauls. It is definitely the most knocked off guitar in history. But there are more than double in circulation than were actually produced.
Yep.
And I've read that I've read that in various places. So keep that in mind. Stratocasters, standard Strats, they're getting knocked off all the time.
What is it, 54 Strats or 56 Strats that are the big? It's a mid-50s
I would
model.
say it's like a 57, but the 57 is usually really, really popular. But
yeah. And then, of course, your 1960.
Yeah, 60, 61, 62.
Yep.
Again, that goes with that Johann video. But the reality is this. Any vintage piece could be knocked off. I think as you get into the fringe companies like Univox and people like that, you're probably a lot less likely to get burned. Right. And it may not necessarily be burned. Look, there are people that know they have knocked off guitars and they're really good.
Right.
Like you were talking about Slash. There's a perfect example. He still uses the Appetite for Destruction Les Paul.
Absolutely. And it's an excellent Les Paul. Again, like you said, you can call it whatever you want. It's still a knockoff.
Right. So, just keep that in mind if you're looking at players grade vintage. The other thing to keep in mind is that this has become a very popular market for the trendy retailers like Chicago Music Exchange, and they jack their prices up accordingly. So, I've seen guitars listed there for as much as $1,000 over what Blue Book would be.
Yeah.
So,
and there is no real Blue Book. Let's face it.
there is a Blue Book, but it's not that accurate.
Right. The Blue Book of guitars is how much are people willing to pay for it.
The Blue Book of guitars is now eBay and completed listings and sales.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot more, and it gets a lot more gray when you're looking at vintage stuff.
Yeah.
So bear that in mind. I think the sharp deal, if you're looking for stuff now, 90s Les Pauls and 90s SGs, they're cheap and they're decent.
Yep.
I don't know that I would buy anything from the 2000s, but I think the prices on the 90s stuff are starting to go up. I think people are clued in now. I remember a time when you could get a 90s like SG for like $750, $800. Now they're pushing $1,000, I think. So,
yeah, that's a tough one. I'm looking one up right now.
Yeah, give us some up to date pricing info, Jim.
So 94. Well,
94 works.
Okay, so standard a Gibson SG standard from the 90s.
Yeah.
$675.
That's not bad.
At $800.
Yeah,
there's one 1990 for $1,500. I think that's a little high.
That's not. Nobody's going to be doing that one. But right around $1,000, between $600 and $1,000 is probably where I would expect to be.
But the difference is the cheaper ones have the big
guard versus small guard.
Big guard, and the other one has a small guard.
And you know what? There's some truth to that. If you guys are into SGs, the big guard versus small guard, the argument, of course, is the pickup rings actually hold the pickup at the right position for the strings. Yep. They do sound slightly different. The big guards actually sound a little bit more, I would say, acoustic to me. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's because the pickups. So the rings are more like a direct mount. They retain a little bit more of the treble response of like a direct mount pickup, whereas putting them in a big guard like that, they don't resonate the same. It takes off some of the treble.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that there's that few 90s Les Pauls.
Well, they're out there. They're just not for sale on Reverb right now.
Well, that's what I mean.
I think a lot of that stuff's already ending up in the hands of collectors. And that's another thing that drives me nuts is the Player's Grade Vintage now is becoming the throwback guitars, the ones that just got beat to hell, went through a war, and they're still out there because the collector's market is such a big deal even now that people are literally buying up these guitars, throwing them in cases, and sticking them in vaults. Yeah. And we've already learned at this point that the collectors are not making money off these instruments. This is just a pure fantasy myth that you're going to buy a guitar and then somehow make thousands of dollars on it in 5 years.
It is.
I mean, the market just doesn't move that fast unless it's something like 59 Les Paul. But
even then, it's slowing.
Yeah, they haven't really increased in value in quite some time. So I mean, they've been $150,000 roughly for quite a while. Probably almost the entire time I've been playing guitar. So I think some of them go for a little bit more, some of them go for a little bit less, and that's condition. I can't say that enough.
Absolutely.
The condition should be determining what you pay. And I'm the guy, like, when somebody asks me, what does this cost, and I look it up online, and I'm like, yeah, I'd be say about this, but I don't look at the ad and, like, look at the condition of it. And I end up looking like an idiot, because I'm like, well, that was a neck repair, so really it should probably be $200 to $300 less,
Jeez. Yeah, depending on the year and
what it is.
You're looking at a percentage off right there. I mean, a good percentage off. And it depends. I mean, if it's a Stratocaster and you've had a neck replacement, then it's a different year.
Well,
but if
that's the other thing is, so we were talking about Gibsons and we've been looking at it from that angle. If you go look at vintage Fenders and replacement parts, you don't know how many of those vintage Fenders are parts guitars to begin with.
Absolutely.
And many of them are, where like somebody had a body laying around in the 80s and then they threw their 59 neck on it, and then they're like, oh, this is a 59. And then you take it apart and you look at the date stamps and you're like, what the fuck? Like, this isn't what I paid for.
Exactly. But if you look at some of your most famous Strats, they've got those replacement necks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Clapton's, I think it's Blackie.
Clapton's was, Gilmore's
no,
was.
his whole guitar. Well, this is Gilmore's. His whole guitar was a parts guitar, like pickups and all.
Gilmore?
Yeah, no, Clapton, and then
Clapton,
of course, Gilmore. I think Gilmore's neck swaps on the Black Strat.
And he swapped it more than once.
Yeah, I think. Well, so I think he swapped to the Rosewood or whatever, and I think he went back to maple. And he's got maple on it now, but I think that he's put the same maple neck on it several times.
Yep.
That's what people have talked about over the years, is like he had a rosewood on there for a while and then he went back to maple. No rhyme or reason for us to know why. I mean, if we had a conversation with him, we could ask that question. But which that's another thing. When Fender does these repro guitars and these stories start coming out, like, why can't Fender actually talk to David Gilmour and be like, why did you swap necks?
Right.
It seems like they want to keep that mythos alive. And I've seen it with other guitar players, like Yngwie, when they did the Play Loud Strat, they didn't ask him, like, what's the deal with the duck, a sticker, the Donald Duck sticker. Like, yeah, the Ferrari thing we get. He's a Ferrari collector. But Donald Duck, like, well, what's that on there for?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question.
And they don't ask those questions. I think it's almost like, well, if we do that, then that kind of reveals the mystery, So anyway, we're reaching 1 hour, Jim. I think it's time to wrap things up. It's been good tonight. I really enjoy talking about vintage stuff, and we probably should do this more often.
And we've got some exciting stuff coming down the pipe.
If you guys want to share vintage ads in the group of things that make you drool, we can look at the value of them and kind of do our practical assessment. Yes. And that would be a kind of a cool segment for the show. So if you guys want to do that,
practical assessment,
tag us and we'll talk. So with that all being equal, again, hearts are out for the tragedy that Jim discussed earlier in the show. Awful,
terrible thing.
Awful, abysmal, horrible thing.
18 people were in that limo and they all died. Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
2 others.
I can't even imagine.
Yep.
All right.
Terrible thing.
So, on that sour, dour note, I've been David tonight.
I've been Jim tonight.
And we're the Practical Guitarists.
Tonight.
Yep. Have a good one. Tonight.
Tonight.